What if the way you've been telling your life story reveals the secret to what is holding you back? Stories play an integral part in how we see not only ourselves, but the whole world. Stories are more than just an important part of communication. They also reveal hidden aspects of our inner talk, which can either support us or end up holding us back from the very things we want most in life, without us even realizing it. Join author, mindset coach, and award-winning singer-songwriter Carrie Rowan on her show, Look for the Good, every Monday at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. when she shares nuggets of wisdom from her internationally best-selling book, Tell a New Story, 5 Simple Steps to Release Your Negative Stories and Bring Joy to Your Life. Carrie's powerful stories and compelling guests will empower you to change how you look at your own life while giving you some powerful tools and tips you can use every day to help you feel better and move yourself closer to the life you've been longing to live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Look for the Good. I'm your host, Carrie Rowan, mindset strategist and coach, and I love sharing nuggets of wisdom about the stories that we tell each other, but more importantly, those stories that we tell right up here to ourselves quietly. You can join me and my special guests as we share our personal stories of strength and triumph every week here on Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. You can listen online on your mobile device, in your car, or ask Alexa to play Dream Vision 7 Radio. And join us, evolve with us as we unite humankind with universal love. And my show airs every Monday, in case you guys didn't remember, at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. And when you tune in, you're going to get real stories and tips on how to turn your story and your life around. And welcome, everybody. You know that I love talking about stories. And we're just going to give a little shout out to Kaitlyn waiting in the wings. Hello, Kaitlyn.
Hi.
And before we get going, and I'm going to tell you all about Kaitlyn, we love talking about those stories, right? The good, the bad, the ugly stories. And it's really in those stories that we learn so much about each other, right? But we also learn so much about ourselves in those stories. And a lot of times as we really start to unravel these stories, sort of like peeling that onion back, right? There's different layers to our stories. And a lot of times, on top of that story that we think is kind of a really bad story, or we've judged the story to be our worst story ever, right? And I know when somebody comes to me with a story like that, deep inside, there is something really beautiful happening in that story. But a lot of times we're so wrapped up in it and the emotions of it that we can't see what's really in our own quote unquote, air quote, if you can't see me, worst story, right? Because I'm here to say, inside that worst story of yours lies your superpower, right? In that story. And sometimes, I'll recommend to people to talk to their friends about their worst story if you're trying to rewrite your story and tell a better story, because they can see your strengths inside the story that sometimes we can't see. We get so used to that story. We get so used to feeling a certain way about that story that sometimes we're blind to actually the beauty in our own worst story. So I'm here to say that you can find strength and resilience in your worst story, right? So as we were looking through our stories and you start doing this work with me, thinking about the stories that you tell yourself quietly inside, you can always ask yourself that question, that really important pivotal question when you come up with a story is, how does this story make me feel? How does it make me feel when I tell it? How does it make other people feel? What's the effect on other people when I tell that story? And that's why I love this work with stories so much, because as we will come on and we're going to talk about some of Kaitlyn's stories today, you discover more about yourself and your life and the way you think and how it could be different if you just change one little story, that one little story going on in your head. And a lot of times we have that negative story, but also don't forget, guys, about those beautiful positive stories. That one little thing that somebody said to you when you were younger that really changed the trajectory of what you thought about yourself. That one teacher that encouraged you to go for it, or hey, you're good at writing, or that one little story that stuck and it's a really good story. Sometimes we push those aside because we don't want to believe the good stories. So don't forget about the good stories too. And Kaitlyn, hello, Kaitlyn Cunningham Morse. So excited to
Hi.
have you here. Um, can I read your little bio here that I have?
Please, thank you.
I would love to. So, Kaitlyn Cunningham Morse is a seasoned senior care consultant and founder of Maine Aging Partners, a service dedicated to empowering families as they navigate the complex world of senior living and care options. With a background in sales, lobbying, and over 15 years of experience in the aging field, Kaitlyn is passionate about making a difference through education, advocacy, and support. And I love that because you're so well-rounded in what you've done. Um, yeah, it's really beautiful. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk with you today.
Again, I love the varied aspect of your background, like coming from sales, like because you and I have that in common. I feel like teaches you so much about business in general and lobbying. Want to hear more about that? That must have
Yeah.
been fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent 10 years or so in senior care sales. I worked as a building or a facility sales manager for what at the time was the largest independent living company in the country. They were a big chain, and I had a struggling building, which I helped to turn around and worked with older folks to sell them on senior living. And then I went and worked as a senior, well, my title was Director of Transitional Care, which just meant I help folks leave rehabilitation and go to a, go home, hopefully,
Mm.
with the help of a clinical home care agency. And so that was a great experience. But between the two opportunities, I just learned the ins and outs of how to assist older adults as they transition their own care needs,
Mhm.
which was great. And I did it largely because my grandmother was a really special woman, and she ended up in assisted living, and it was a horrible experience for her. I think
Oh,
there's so many people who have horrible care experiences. So
yeah.
it's my job now to empower folks and help them believe in the decisions they're making to get the best outcomes.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then lobbying, I was involved in campaigns for many, many years and worked for politicians who were running for office. Um, I worked on national campaigns, I worked on state campaigns, and I worked on local campaigns. You learn a lot
Wow.
about marketing and people interaction from those.
Oh, yeah. Networking to the
Totally.
hilt, right?
Yep.
Like, I
Yep.
mean, that is a great jump into networking.
Yes.
That is so cool. I love that. Again, that's brought you right here. I love how you can take all those experiences, right, and bring them right here to where you are today. That's really
Absolutely.
powerful. And making transitions, and I love that talking about the transitions because every one of those things you did was a transition, and then into starting your own thing, was a
Yeah.
huge transition.
So I started 3 years ago, and it was very small at the time, just family and friends.
Mm-hmm.
And it's evolved into I teach frequently with community groups and businesses about what to expect when you make those transitions and
Mm-hmm.
how to best support your loved ones during those times.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also consult with families one on one.
Wonderful. And that's so needed, right? This generation is getting older. We're living longer, right? We need this. This is very needed to have somebody who really understands and you've been there on a lot of different fronts and different types of situations. So you understand the subtleties involved. And it's very emotional as well.
It's emotional, and senior care in most places is messy.
Mm, yeah.
And it can be a really challenging experience for families.
Yeah.
And, again, I've been through many transitions myself, so apply some of that understanding, apply some of that knowledge
Mm-hmm.
to my work with older folks. The hardest part of working with older folks is that by the time they're in their 80s or their 90s, they've already lost so much that
Mm-hmm.
making a move into assisted living or making a move into, some form of senior care can just feel like another loss.
Mm.
And often that's why I think people fight it.
Yes. It's their last grasp of independence, right? And it's that, oh, they've already had to make all these changes that they didn't choose to make.
Right.
things that right have happened to them physically. They
Definitely.
haven't been their choices, and they're trying to roll with the punches. But now you're that's that last piece of freedom is living on their own. It's I think it's more of a mindset than anything, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and that's a hard one. Um, and that's so interesting that you talk about it in terms of loss because it is. They like how do they find that time and that space to grieve these as they go through, okay, they lost their license on, they can't drive, their kids moved away, or someone physically, their spouse or someone that they lose. How do they change that mindset? How can they get back to, feeling like they have something to live for?
I think it takes time, patience, and support.
Mm,
And that's what I provide through Maine Aging Partners. I think about this couple that I worked with early on in the business, and they had family, but the family lived out of state. And they had this home that they'd lived in for 40 years and needed to leave it. And the family from out of state called me and said, these folks are struggling. My parents are struggling. Can you make a difference? And it was early on in my business, so I'm trying everything and really just figuring out what works. And I went with them and I sat with the parents every Friday afternoon for 3 months maybe. Every
wow.
Friday I would go sit with the parents and we would talk about what they were scared of, what they were hesitant about, and why they wouldn't make the move.
Mm-hmm.
And then on Mondays, we would go tour facilities. And ultimately, they made their own decision. They felt empowered by the time we were through, but it was allowing
Mm.
them to have the space to sit where they were at.
I love that. And experience something else instead of shoving it down their throat. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be, you know what I mean? Like
Correct. And yeah,
letting
I mean,
them.
a lot of folks find when they move to a senior living facility, it is not a bad thing. It's actually a positive choice. There is a
Mhm.
social life that maybe they didn't have before, access to food, there are resources, but it's really hard to get there.
Yeah, I'm sure because it's a total mindset shift.
Yeah.
And like
Yep.
you said, they're already navigating all these other things. And now it's just one more thing on that list. So I love the way that you approached that and gave them the space and the time that they needed and, dove in to understand, hey, what are your concerns? What are you most worried about? What are you afraid of? Right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's really,
Because
really huge.
you don't think, I can't put myself there, I'm in my 30s, but I believe when you get to be 80, you're not thinking, how can I best restart my life?
Right? You don't. You don't want to.
Right,
Sorry, your life.
right.
Right? It's so true. My mom is in her early 80s. She doesn't want to give up
Right,
any of that stuff. She doesn't
yep,
want to change. She doesn't want to start a new exercise program. She doesn't want to eat any different.
yep,
I'm like, Mom, you really got to work on your diet. I'm 80, Carrie.
yeah.
I've gotten this far. I'm not changing my whole diet. All right.
Bless her.
Right? Heart attack and all. She's not changing her diet. And that's her choice, right? She
Yeah.
gets to choose
Yeah,
that,
yep, yep. But a lot of times, what's hard about senior care is that those choices are not made by the older person. Those choices are made by their children. And I
Yeah.
think having that autonomy taken away is very difficult.
Oh, it's so hard. And the kids don't want to put them in, a place, they want them to feel that freedom, but it's a lot. It's a lot to maintain that freedom,
Right.
especially if they have some mobility issues or you know what I mean? Now they've got health issues. You know what I'm talking about. It's hard to manage all that for everybody.
Yep. For sure.
Yeah, and it comes down to that. So I love that your whole focus is on transitions. Tell us a story about one of your transitions that really helped to give you some insight, maybe a transition that you didn't want to make. Um,
Yeah. So I recently got divorced. And
okay,
I'm
that's a
still
big one.
learning how to talk about it, if I'm honest, but I will
Okay.
share that it's a moment in time that makes you recognize what you value.
I like that.
And for me, spending time with my boys and helping support them is
Yep.
the main drive.
Yeah.
And this business has also given me hope as well. I think going and working with these older folks just inspires me.
Mm.
And those things have become very important.
Yeah, I love what you said about your values because people talk about this a lot, but I don't think anybody really stops, like you said, to give yourself that space. Hey, wait, what are the values? How do I want to live my life? what's most important to me. We're so busy in this world and we're so externally focused and everything's vying for our attention, right? That we don't ever really take that quiet time to sit and say, what is important to me? How do I
Yeah,
want to live my life, right?
absolutely. Yep, I couldn't agree with you more. Well said.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's like, I help my clients with this because we lose when we're in the middle of something like that, which causes loss and grief and all those feelings come up. It's hard to navigate it all. And if you don't have, a direction or no values are a great place to start.
Yes, that's what I work with a lot, especially when I'm dealing with the families, it's another story. But when I'm working with the older person directly, what is it you're looking for?
Yeah.
If we could make your life even better,
Mm,
what direction would it go in?
I love that. What's important to you? And I also love, for any kind of transitions, when I help clients with transition is like, what's your intention? Again, these are things that you
Totally.
need to, right? You need to
Totally. Yep.
stop and think about. I mean,
Yep.
I recommend every morning spending time, quiet time by yourself, little morning routine, non negotiable, meaning non negotiable to everybody else, but non negotiable to yourself. You do it every morning and you sit and you reflect, wait, what's my intention for today? Because when you take the time to set those for yourself, doesn't it change the way you approach and your mindset about everything?
100%. You know what? I don't do it often enough, if I'm honest.
All right, we're gonna have to talk about that, Caitlin. None of us do. That's why if you don't put it in the calendar, it's not happening, right? We just get taken away by all the stuff that's urgent, but maybe not important, but still needs to get done. And so setting aside that time for yourself to really think about, and expect that's why I love what you're doing with people. You're giving them that time and space to be like, what's most important to you? Because we forget that.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I think we have a drive for that when we're in our like early 20s
Mm,
and the whole pursuit of a career.
yeah.
I think we have a stronger understanding of what that means to us. But then as we get older, I think it becomes harder to connect with that
Mm.
instinct.
I agree. I agree. Until we get older, right? It's like it sort
Yeah.
of has to come back around again in
Yep.
our lives unless
Yep.
we deliberately do it. This time of year, I think people would be more open to sitting down to do it because they're thinking about, a New Year's resolution
For
or
sure.
right, that feeling of the new year is exciting and hopeful and especially this year, we've got a whole lot going on in the world and um, there's a hope for newness, hopefully, that things will be better the following year.
Yeah.
And I think it gives people that inspiration. But you're right, the early 20s and then later. And, the line of work that you're in makes me think about the rocking chair test, which I talk to clients about, and I talk about it when I do as a talk, is where you imagine yourself in that rocking chair, right? You're in your happy place. You're sitting there, you're thinking about what is it that I feel good about in my life? Because the studies show, as you probably know, people, that are aging or on their deathbed, they don't talk about what they did. They talk about that one little thing that they didn't do, the thing that's like the stuck in their
Yeah,
craw, right?
absolutely. That's
And
it's so funny. I had a conversation with someone the other day about how largely that's why I'm running after I'm chasing this. That's why Maine Aging Partners is so important to me.
mm,
It's so I have that connection to something.
yeah, I love that. I love that. And that's what they think about. And it's the thing they didn't do, right? And so that's why I love that you're doing it, you're pursuing it. It's that little thing. What's that little thing in the back of your mind that keeps knocking? It's knocking on your soul door. It's like, hey, you need to fill in the blank. Get back to your music. Start painting again. Do
Yes.
something, right? It's
Yes.
like that little whisper that we
I
try
had
to push
left
away.
politics for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years when my
Hmm.
kids were born and I was married and I realized that wasn't for me. I advocate more when I'm working with these older folks and helping them find facilities than I advocated when I was in politics.
I love that. But it gave you the wherewithal to do it, right? It gave you the training ground that you needed in that field. And that's why I feel like everything is like a little crumb trail. It's leading us right exactly to where you are right now in life.
For sure.
And when you can turn around and look back and go, wow, I see now how that experience helped you
Mm,
get right to where you are today.
absolutely. Yep.
And that's
Yep.
powerful. And I feel like in that also is where that intention comes into play for us, right? Right? Like,
Totally.
this
Yeah.
is my life. This is your life's work. This is
Yep.
what you were meant to do. And I love that you found it in your 30s because most people aren't that lucky,
Yeah.
Caitlin.
Thank you.
We
I
mean,
I sometimes go, how did I fall? Like, how did this become a thing? Like, but it is, and I love it.
right? And it's more of a thing now. So this is such a great conversation. We're going to come back. We're going to break real quick, everybody. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Caitlin. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Look for the Good. I'm here with Kaitlyn Cunningham Morse, and we're having this amazing conversation. We're sharing about the rocking chair test. Kind of launched us on that, and that's really thinking of yourself when you're sitting on that rocking chair in your 90s, looking back on your life, and you don't want to have those regrets, right? And that's why I absolutely love that you're doing what you're doing because this is your life's work. This is your mission. This is your intention, right? Is to empower everybody, and I think it's so pertinent right now. Talk about that a little bit. Like people are getting older now. Like this is so important.
They're older, but they're not dead.
Exactly.
And I think that's
Right?
really, that's really important to remember.
Yeah.
Um, and even though their values have changed, and even though they are looking at life differently,
Mhm.
if they can still find a way to be engaged, usually they'll choose to do that.
Yes. I love that. They want to be part of it. They want to be, that's why they don't think they want to go live somewhere else because they are like, but wait, I don't want to give up this and that and this. And I like my neighbors and I like my garden. And
Yeah.
I like being outside. I like all these things, and they want to still stay connected. I think that's really
Yes,
important.
for sure. So finding, that's part of what I do is helping find the value that is consistent, whether they're at home in a home they may have lived in for 10 years or 40, with the value that comes out of assisted living.
Mm. Yeah.
What is that, you know, like concurrent thread, I guess I would say.
Yeah. I love that. The concurrent thread. Right. Like what is it that you're looking for? How can we make it the same, but yet better for you, with the values, right?
Yep,
And
absolutely.
everything else that you're looking for. I think that's really important, especially now. We were talking a little bit on the break. Um, because people are living older, right? Like I love that Netflix special on the blue zones. It's so
Yeah.
fascinating to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I want to go to that Greek island and check that out. And I want to go to that part of Italy, like where these people are from and all the studies they did.
I
And
don't know how many blue zones there actually are, but I tell you, up here there's actually a senior home, for lack of a better word, or
mm-hmm,
older folks' home.
mm-hmm.
That's the politically correct way to say it right now.
Is it? Okay.
Um, and it's this beautiful brick house where folks can buy into it, and
Mm-hmm.
they only serve blue zone food.
No way.
Yeah.
I
Yep.
love that.
Yep.
That's really cool. That minestrone soup they showed in the Italian one, and then that wine. There was a special wine when they
Yes.
went to one of the Greek islands. There was this special wine that they all drank. But really, the underlying theme that I got out of it was it's not only that food, it's the space in which you're eating it, right? It's the
Mm,
sharing. It's the
absolutely.
right. It's that community, which it sounds like they're trying to create in that beautiful brick
Yeah.
house.
Yeah. Yep. When I used to sell assisted living, well, I sold independent, which is a little different, but
Hmm.
living, what do we call it? Not assisted living, but living with assistance.
I like that. Living
The
with
meals were
assistance.
all every few hours.
Yeah.
And I will say, we used to tell families, like, look, they're going to struggle the first 3 months, but after that, they might get some pep in their step.
Mm, interesting. And they're struggling because they're adapting to the change,
Right. Exactly.
the newness,
Yep.
the
Yep.
resistance
Exactly.
that they had about being there, probably because it might not have been their choice, right?
Oh, I was just gonna say, a lot of times older folks don't choose therapy either,
Right.
which certainly would be helpful if they
Yes, it
did.
would be. Yep, it's that generation. Their generation is very different than how we think about therapy. We're like, everybody's in therapy, right? Our
Yes,
kids have been in therapy, right? Like, we're just
yes,
all pro therapy because we didn't
yep,
have that. But that generation still, like I know my mom's
Yeah.
forget it. It
Yeah.
is still a very negative connotation,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
word. Yeah, we got to come up
Emotions run
with,
high in this process.
yeah, that's a very subtle way to put it, Caitlin.
Yeah. You sound like you have a lot of experience, Terry.
Emotions run high. So, what do you do? How do you help somebody when their mindset is just this? The emotions are so high. How do you help a family navigate that?
I mean, so the first thing is you got to be rooted in understanding what's in the marketplace. And you have to
Hmm.
know it is a market, unfortunately. These places are not in it to really care and consider your loved one. Of course, they are, but at the same time, they're there to make money.
It's a business, absolutely.
And so understanding your value in the marketplace is really important.
That's interesting. Hmm.
A lot of times people are shocked to find out that depending on the occupancy of a building, you can actually negotiate your rates.
Wow, very interesting little tidbit.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
I love that. Um, and so, it's interesting. Like, so when you're trying to navigate the families coming together, like, would you go to a meeting with like the whole family and then you're running that
Yeah.
meeting?
My favorite is working one-on-one with the older person, but that's
Yeah.
not always the best.
Hmm.
So like for example, the other night I sat with a family. It was a brother and a sister and their significant others. And we just had a conversation about what's out there. They had toured a facility and they said, we just want to make sure she's happy. What are
Yeah.
my options? How do they compare? And we went into detail on, you know, all pieces of it, all factors.
Hmm.
Without knowing the mom, I can't speak to her heart, and where
Yeah.
she's at, but I could certainly evaluate the options with the family.
Hmm. And that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, I like that. I can see how you'd want to meet one on one with them first because then you can understand them and then you can sort of relay that message to the family, right? As opposed to the other way around.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly.
Then it does remind me of children to a degree, right? Because
Yeah.
or of older children ready to make a transition, as you don't want to tell them what to
Exactly.
do,
Yep.
right?
Yep. I used
It's
to joke that the independent living facility where I worked reminded me of my college dormitory.
with a whole lot less beer.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what they need. Maybe they need more beer.
Well, there are facilities, or they call them communities.
Uh-huh.
Internal speak is you're in a community, you're not in a facility, but
Right.
communities, depending on which one you're in, a lot of times will allow that or make it possible for that. Many settings have happy hours.
It's hilarious.
Yeah. Yep. Again, they're starting to figure out these aren't the nursing home model. These are
Right.
the social model, and engaging those folks is so important. So how did they do it?
So, yes, because that's the underlying thing about the people who are living to 100 is that socialization. As soon as you have isolation, I feel like you're in trouble.
So my grandmother lived to 94 and 363 days. She was 2 days shy of her 95th birthday.
Wow.
And honestly, many of her children, so she had 8 kids and she raised them all by herself. She was just this model of resilience. But
Wow.
um, she died because a lot of us believe she died because she was in assisted living and she was isolated and didn't have friends her own age. Everyone around her had dementia. That's not the experience a lot of people have. If you're in a
Hmm.
market where there's a lot of competition for senior living, then that's great. But she was in a northern community in Maine
Hmm.
and it was rural, very much so. So she had moved from her college dorm, so to speak, which she loved and was very, very social in, to an assisted living setting where she could get care. And she literally dropped dead one day. And
Oh,
we all believe she just gave up.
that's so hard.
It's horrible. It's been 7 years and she still shapes so much of what I do.
That is beautiful. Her legacy lives on in you.
Thank you.
And I love
Yeah.
that. And then you can hand that down to your children, right? To your boys, so they understand who she was, what she was all about, what her lessons were, right? Because that's what we do as parents. We remember, oh, I do that with my dad because he died really young. And I do that. My kids don't even remember him because they were literally just born. And so I'm always sharing that. A story will come to mind and I'm sharing that with them, right? I love
Mm,
doing that.
absolutely. Yeah. Talk about her a lot with my boys.
I love that. And then they can feel like they at least kind of sort of knew,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
One of them met her once when he was 1 years old, but
oh, right. But
they
he's not going
never,
to remember.
yeah, they never had a relationship with her,
But they're
unfortunately.
so lucky to have this, like, of a great grandma. You don't know all the stories usually of your great grandma.
Well, and we've talked about values, like the value for us as a family has always been resilience.
Yeah.
She raised 8 kids after her husband died young
Wow.
by herself. She
By
went back to
herself.
work when women weren't working, or she went to work when women weren't working. She did whatever she could to raise those kids in a nice way. And I'll tell you, I am blessed. They're all still living, and I have the
Wow.
most incredible aunts and uncles. They're just amazing.
Mm, mm. I
And
love
the
that.
idea is you just keep going. If something gets in my family, you just go, 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 go. If something gets in your way, well, you'll figure it out someday.
And I love that they're all living and healthy, right? Because in there she was struggling to make a family work,
Yeah. Yep.
in the day and age when women weren't doing that. That is unbelievable.
She was incredible.
What a story. I love that. That's really, really powerful. And we can all learn. I mean, resilience is so important to teach that to our kids, isn't it? And that's so
Oh,
lovely that it
sure.
was passed down to you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I would just say if resilience at all costs is the goal, that might not be healthy, but
Yeah. Right.
you know, but certainly, man, it's one of those, it's a buzzword now too, but I mean, just
Yeah.
to have grit and have determination, all of those things are really powerful.
So important. And to teach that to the kids, right? This other generation that they've grown up different than we have because they've grown up with these silly things in their hand and they think that everything on there is true and all those other things, but like having that resilience and that grit is something that I feel like you need a role model for, right? And that's
For
exactly what your
sure.
grandmother was.
Yes, absolutely.
Because they're not really sure, what is that? What do you mean? Like they can't really wrap their arms around it. But raising resilient kids is so important because then you know that they can bounce back from any of the stuff that they're gonna, encounter in the real world.
My parents did a very fine job.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
your
they
mom had this great leader in her life, right? And then,
for sure, for sure. There's only 3 of us in my family, not 8 like my mom's, but um, we all have overcome obstacles and we all work together when we can to do that, which is pretty awesome, I think.
oh, I love that. You all work together. So it's a really tight knit family.
Yes,
That's really nice. Is everybody still in Maine?
we are in Maine. My sister and I, we took some, so when I would have been, yeah, so when we were in our early 20s, my sister and I moved across the country. I lived in Alaska and she
Ooh.
lived in California. My mom just always said, when you have your children, please come back. And we did.
Wow, Alaska. That's so cool.
Yes, it was a great experience.
That must have been so beautiful. It's stunning out there.
It is stunning out there. And it's just a very life-changing opportunity.
Yeah, I'm sure. Like on those days when like the sun never goes down,
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I
right?
ran a 10K under the midnight sun. It was called
Oh,
the Midnight Sun Fun Run.
how cool. Wow.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Wow. And contrast that to the days where you never really see the sun.
Yes. And it was as cold as 60 below zero
Wow.
and as warm as 90 degrees on the summer days.
Isn't that amazing?
Where I
Wow.
lived had the largest temperature differential in the world,
That's
except
amazing.
for I think Antarctica. Well, there was one other place. I can't remember what it was.
Well, I'm glad you didn't go move there. That is really cool. We're going to break really quick here. We'll be right back with Kaitlyn. Don't go anywhere. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Look for the Good. we're having such a great conversation with Caitlin. And I love how you were talking about resilience and that you lived in Alaska is so cool. Um, so tell us a little bit about, like, kind of wrap it up with some of the stuff that you learned from your grandma and your mom about resilience, because you just grew up in this really cool environment for that. If you could give somebody a couple tips on how they could be more resilient or help their kids be more resilient, what would you say?
I would say know your value and or
Yeah.
not your value. I mean, know your value is important, but know what you value and what
Mm,
you're chasing. Have a, a lot of people say have a why. I mean, I feel like that's a silly catchphrase, but it's probably not untrue.
yeah. Right. It's become a
Honestly, like,
catchphrase, but what does it even mean? Right. It's like
yeah,
you got to get,
yeah.
I mean, I get that too. It's like knowing why you're doing it is sort of like your intention, right? Because if you can give it a bigger meaning. So I love that.
I mean, my grandmother knew, I think having conversations with my mom about her since she's passed, there's a few things my grandmother knew. My grandmother knew that she really wanted what was right for her children, even though she couldn't provide them with a lot because there were eight of them. And my mom will say we raised ourselves in many
Wow.
ways.
Mm-hmm.
But she knew she needed to take care of them, and she did.
Mm-hmm.
The other
Yeah.
thing that I really find interesting about my grandmother is that even though she did not go to school after she completed high school
Mm-hmm.
because she took care of some ill family members. She valued education more than anyone I've ever met.
Wow. That's really cool.
So she had these thoughts for her kids, and she had feelings and experiences that drove her.
That's really cool. And educate, that's so important. She reminds me of my dad, which is who I wrote a lot of my book about, his little catchphrases and things. And one of the things he absolutely believed in was just what you said, education.
Yeah, yeah,
He,
interesting.
isn't that interesting? He would
Yep.
say to me, um, Carrie, there's nothing more important than education. Those kids need to go to school and keep going to school. Education, number one most important thing. And isn't it interesting that your grandmother felt that way, but she didn't even get that
Yeah,
additional education,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And
Maybe,
she applied and she was going, and then somebody
hmm
came ill and she couldn't anymore.
yeah, that's what you did
Just,
back then.
yep, just remarkable.
Yeah, unbelievable. So she gave up that piece of her life, right? So she valued it so much because it got taken away from her, really.
Could well be, absolutely. Yep,
you know?
yep.
And so I love that because I still to this day think that's so important for kids to understand, because I think that they, are half-hearted about their education.
It's
Um,
funny, I think about what I do and how much of it is educating folks, but then I think
mhm,
about transitions, and having that education certainly makes a big difference
totally.
to a transition, knowing what you're looking at, knowing what you're going into, it helps quiet the fears.
Yeah, because you have something to fall back on. You have a foundation, right?
Yep, yep.
That is yours. That learning is yours to take away forever. And it's a solid foundation. It's something that never really goes away. And you can't see it. I feel like when you're young, you're just kind of
Mm,
going through the steps. Your parents will kind of push you
yeah,
to do this or
yep,
that. And you're like,
yep,
okay. And we can't always see the value until later in your life, I feel
yeah.
like you were saying, when you needed to, that's where you're getting that resilience. Cause you need resilience to get through higher education. Let's face it, it's hard.
But I think it goes both ways. It makes you more resilient, and it's requiring a resilience.
Beautiful. Beautifully said. So true. And I love that, like my dad too, like they didn't get that experience. So they
Yeah,
wanted it so
yep,
bad
yep,
for their family and knew the importance and the value of a good education.
yeah.
And nowadays I think a lot of that's been lost. But all these things come together and help you be more resilient. I love asking people, do you have like a personal mantra or something that you say to yourself, or something maybe that you taught your kids, or that you can remember your grandma saying about resilience, or anything that really sticks in your head as kind of like a personal mantra?
I say to myself, it will come together frequently.
Ooh, I
It will
like
come
that.
together. You just have to trust the process.
Ooh, I like it when everything seems so disjointed and just kind of
Yes.
crazy, right?
Yep. Yep.
I like that. It will all come together. I love that one. Yep. That's a really good one. It's similar to mine. I have one that says, things are always working out for me. So
Oh,
I'll
cool.
say,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
very similar, like,
Yep.
oh, it's all gonna work out for my best and highest good, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Sort
That's
of the
another thing
same.
that I think as we talk about resilience that has happened to me in the last year since my divorce. I think a lot about what I'm grateful for.
Mm.
And gratitude is now an emotion or not. I don't know if that's an emotion, but it's quite present in my life where it wasn't just a year ago.
Oh, I love that. How did you make it more part of your life?
So I actually when I'm having strong thoughts or strong emotions, I use Chat GPT.
Interesting. I want to hear more about this.
And ChatGPT has been a great way for me to get feedback into what's happening
Mm.
around me.
Ooh, I love that. Like, give me more. Like, give me an
So,
example.
an example might be if you're in really trying negotiations with
Hmm.
your business or whatever it might be.
Hmm.
ChatGPT is really good at finding the straight talk. How do you get straight to the point?
I love
And
that.
so one of the things that's come of it is I've asked ChatGPT recently. I said, "Well, what do you think of me?" I'm like, "This is so interesting."
Really? That is so interesting. And do you know me?
And the response was just incredible, but it was talking about
Really?
resilience and about all of these things, and I'm like, "Geez, this is something else." I
You really do
don't
know
even.
me.
I mean, I'm beginning to use it way more frequently than I ever thought I would.
Wow, that is so interesting. Really fascinating. Uh,
It is. And you can tell it who to think like. So you can say,
yeah,
think like a life coach, well, a social
mhm,
worker or a
mhm,
lawyer or because I work with a lot of lawyers in the community.
I'm sure.
Think like a client and it will actually put on the hat of whatever subject you're looking for.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's all about good question in, good answer out.
Right, right. So if you can figure out how to work with it, it'll do things like spit out, here's what I'd be grateful for if I were you, or
Yeah, I
and
love
that's
that.
actually really cool.
So cool. I love that. That is super cool. And I love the straight talk thing. I think it's really good at that too. Like I use it a lot in my business. And I always tell people, people are, a lot of people are afraid of it, like coaches and writers, people who have books are very worried about what's going to happen. But I don't worry about that because we still need humans like you just came up with an idea that I've never heard anybody use it that way before. You need the creativity to put in.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
going to be it can't be created
Yep.
for you,
Yep. No, absolutely not. But it
right?
is just so interesting how you can
So,
in so many facets of life.
so interesting, right? I love that. Just different ways to use it. And yeah, the fact that you said you can have it be different things, I'll ask it to act as a really good copywriter. I might write something myself and then just have it, you know, usually I like mine better, but I will, run tests with it, right? Because we're still all testing to see if it's really
Yeah. Yep.
what it
Oh,
says
it's
it is.
real and it's powerful.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we're always going to need the humans. That's why it's good in, good out. You put bad in, you're going to
For
get bad out,
sure.
right?
I've read recently that like with artificial intelligence, it's one of those things that can make you so much more efficient if you have the smarts to work with it to begin with.
Exactly. It's all, you got to have the right prompts,
Yep.
right? It's
Yep,
all about the
exactly.
prompting. But I love that. I love that. Why not reach out for that? And, if you're looking for something
Yeah.
very specific, or you want to know more about resilience, or define this for me, or yeah, I love that. I really love that. That you surprised me with that. You showed me a new way to use.
I mean, when I started Maine Aging Partners, the goal wasn't to be a consulting firm. The goal
Yeah.
was to build some kind of app that would take the biases
Ooh,
out of this process, because
that's
that's what
very
families
interesting.
deserve.
Yeah.
So I've explored this technology because I want to do something bigger.
I love that. Wow, that is so cool. Having an app that can analyze without all the emotions and, like you said, the
Yeah,
biases. And because we might think something's one thing, but really it's another, and you don't know. And that's why they come to you, because you are a trusted resource,
for sure.
right? And you know you've been there, you've been down that road, and you understand the subtleties that you would only know from actually being
Experience.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And that's
Absolutely.
huge. Yeah, I love that. And that's how I think you've just answered that other question I asked you too, about how do you manage, how do you cut through all that emotion that gets so high between
Oh
family members,
man,
right?
I'll tell you, ChatGPT does a great job of that. Yeah, it's interesting. There's talk about how ChatGPT evolves and how it will fill in the gaps
Yeah.
emotionally. So
Hmm.
there is a discussion around that. But when you want to just cut to the chase, it does a really good job.
I love that. Yeah. Believe me, the humans can fill in the emotional blanks. We
Yeah,
got all the
yeah.
emotional stuff, right? But when it's irrational emotions, I love that. I love that you can just cut to the answers and get the answers. It's a really cool tool at our fingertips, right? I'm not worried that it's going to take over
Absolutely.
humanity. I think we're always going to need humans to be the creative source of everything.
I have like no subscriptions except maybe one or two. And I'll tell you, I subscribe to ChatGPT because having access to the extra, oh, it's yeah.
So good. Yeah. Absolutely. The other day, I even used it for, like, my husband was sick, and I put all his symptoms in, and it gave me, it spit out
Oh,
this little
wow.
list. Could be this, and that.
Cool.
It really
Yep.
cool.
Yep.
Ask it to act as a functional medicine, because I like functional medicine doctor, and
Hmm.
this as well.
That's
And it gave me
awesome.
a, right. It was so cool.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and what herbs would help, or you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, you can
Yep.
really go down whatever your specific path is that you're interested in. You can go down that. So I love that.
Yeah.
We should
Yep.
all put in, how can I be more resilient?
Yeah.
Like Kaitlyn
I would
Cunningham
be
Morse.
curious. I've never done that.
Put your own name in and see what it knows about you. It's like
Yes.
doing a Google search,
Well,
right?
I saw somebody do it with an image. They said create an image of me based on what you know about me. And that's
Really?
really interesting. Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Super. Well, see, look at that. We're learning so much today. I didn't even know we were going to talk about technology, but I love it. So share with us, what's your website if people are hearing this and loving what you're saying, they want to find out more.
Yeah, so it's Maine, like the state, Maine, aging.com. I think it's really important to note that even though my website talks a lot about the state of Maine, I will work with families everywhere. And some of my best clients in the past have been families who lived elsewhere but had parents in Maine.
Awesome.
So yeah, yep.
Yeah, keep that heat up. It's very cold up in Maine.
It actually isn't too, it's yeah, it's cold, but it's still 30, I think. So it's like,
Yeah, you're okay. You're like, it's not Alaska, Carrie. It's not
yeah.
cold. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation, Caitlin. I've loved having you on the show. Had a great conversation. You shared so many awesome stories. I love all those stories about your grandma. So thank you so much for coming on. Look
Thank
for the
you.
good.
It
You're
was a great
welcome.
time.
Awesome. Loved it. And remember, everybody, it is never too late to live your best story. Be well.
Thanks for tuning in to Look for the Good with your host, Carrie Rowan, best-selling author and mindset coach. Join us every Monday at 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. right here at Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. If you weren't able to catch an episode, no worries. Just visit our website to find all the archived episodes of Look for the Good on demand, so you don't miss a thing. And remember, it's never too late to live your best story. For additional resources or to find out about how you can work with Carrie directly, visit carrierowan.com for more details.